Good evening, everyone. So we are doing it. We are slaying a second authoritarian. I'm very proud of us. So here's the message that we start off with tonight. Stay the course. Do not go back to Twitter. He's going to step down tonight as head of Twitter, Musk Twitter. That is a first step only. But our strategy remains the same. Now let's just quickly go through what has happened and what has put us to the point where he needs to step down since we spoke last on Thursday night. First and foremost, Tesla stock declined 15% last week. It's down 62% so far this year, and it's lost a third of its value since Musk closed on Twitter. Okay, so that is the driving force here. The difference between Putin not being able to stop his Ukraine invasion for fear of losing face and what Musk is about to do with Musk Twitter, the difference is there is something that holds him accountable, and that is Tesla. Apologies for the sound in the background. Shep has decided to do his bi-weekly drink of water, which, as you can see, is going to last for a long time. So apologies. Okay. But what has happened since then? We know the value declined. We know the third largest holder of Tesla stock publicly called for Musk to step down as Tesla CEO. We know that others were making that appeal directly to the board. We know that over the weekend, on Friday, it was reported by the Wall Street Journal and Reuters and several others that Musk was approaching equity investors to ask them to take some equity or put some additional equity into Musk Twitter at a price of $44 billion. But as we've discussed here, at this point, Musk Twitter is worth about 1/3 of that. So of course they said no. We also know today he spent the day with Jared and Saudis in Qatar after ironically saying you can't be doxxed. He doxxed himself. But my suspicion is he was also asking them for money, because we do know one of the equity investors in Twitter is one of the princes, one of the Saudi princes. At least one is publicly known to be. We don't know who else is involved, but I'm sure he was asking for money. He went in there with his hat in hand today in the box of the World Cup to ask for money, and I'm sure he was turned down. And we also know all the tumult that he created over the weekend by several acts. First, by banning journalists from his platform unilaterally. Remember the council he was going to form to decide who could stay and who couldn't stay? Authoritarians don't play with that kind of stuff. He never formed that. He just was in a bad mood. He didn't like those people saying mean things about him, so he kicked them off. Then he kicked another Washington Post journalist off yesterday. He tried to let the other ones back on, and only under the circumstance that they would delete their tweets, and they refused. So again, you get the sense of this is one man. It reminds you of Putin. It reminds you of Trump, this authoritarian trait of being erratic, of being very thin-skinned, of being totally in control. The other thing he did, for all the bragging he does about all the traffic on Twitter, he today announced that he would be blocking those of us who put links on Twitter to say, find me on Facebook, find me on IG, find me on Mastodon, because he's that paranoid that people are leaving, and people are leaving. And I can tell you, I mean, I barely do Instagram, but I know a lot of people don't like Facebook. So ironically too, like out of nowhere, Facebook just verified my IG account the day after Musk took over. But so I had a huge influx over at Instagram. My presence grew by 50% there because people are wanting to go somewhere else. So all of these things are happening. And what happens tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m.? The stock market opens again. And you can bet your bottom dollar that these shareholders are up in arms and they are in conversation with the board, even though Elon's brother is on the board and he stacked it with a lot of friendly people. There's only so much they can hold back. And they are telling him either he steps off as the CEO of Tesla or he steps off as the CEO of Twitter. Can't do both. Potentially might be able to do neither when this is all done, but definitely cannot do both. So this poll, as I wrote about in my article, all these polls, remember Trump did the polls too? Oh, I'm such a person of the people. Let me ask it's irrelevant. He's going to step down tonight before the stock market opens tomorrow. You're going to see Tesla stock rally because he's going to say he's going to devote his attention to Tesla, and there's going to be huge short covering on Tesla tomorrow, okay? But we don't care about Tesla. This is not like a stock analysis Facebook Live series. We care about Musk Twitter. And whether he is CEO of it or just the owner of it, nothing is going to change. And let me tell you one thing. He is not going to get talent to run this company. Nobody with any ounce of sense would be the CEO of this company as it is. First of all, he will be in total control, even if someone else in name is the CEO. And second of all, as we're about to review, nothing has changed. This company is a mess. It is probably going to go bankrupt in the very short term. And that's what we've been saying all along, exactly how we thought things were going to play out. Remember I said, be patient. This is not going to last long. We will be able to go back under new ownership. This is playing out exactly as we thought. So stay the course. Do not go back. Now, what have we learned since we spoke last about financials? Well, the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday that Musk Tesla is losing $4 million a day. We also know, remember, we learned about, sorry, I'm still getting used to this being backwards. He has 13 billion of debt outstanding. This is held by 7 banks. It is extremely high coupon, high interest rate. And what we have learned is that this costs 1.2 billion of interest expense a year. What that means, okay, say you have a house or say you have a car and you make monthly payments. A certain amount of that is interest each month. Like if you're buying a home, interest rates went from 3% to 6%, right? So your monthly payment goes way up. Same thing with him. This debt is floating rate. You know how Musk keeps talking about keep the rates lower, Chairman Powell, because his rate floats as well. As rates go up, these loans get more expensive. But the important takeaway is what I just mentioned. This company is losing $4 million a day, and it has to pay $1.2 billion a year of interest on these loans and bonds. That's $100 million a month. We also learned that Musk, remember I told you the 3 red flags to watch for. The first was, you can find all of these in my article on theweeklylist.org about Musk, the authoritarianism, and him failing. But the first red flag is late payment. So we knew early on that he was late paying his vendors, some of his employees. But we learned last week that he's also not paying rent for Twitter's headquarters. Okay, that's a red flag that this company is in a cash crunch, is hemorrhaging cash. We also know last week he sold another $3.6 billion of Tesla stock. That's his second sale. Between his 2 sales, he's sold $7.5 billion of stock to plow in, reportedly, into Twitter, okay? Because this company is hemorrhaging cash. He has now brought the employee count down from 7,500 to roughly 2,000. Still have to pay those employees. He's being sued for not paying severance, and he will lose on those battles. But whoever comes in to run this mess has a company with 2,000 employees, with no communications department, with no trust department, et cetera, no engineers. We've talked all about this. All the engineers are going to be pulled back eventually to Tesla and to SpaceX. The second red flag that we talked about was what would happen when he did the subscription, which was supposed to be the save all. How would that go? Well, we haven't heard any numbers, which can tell you how it's going. And last I checked, as of yesterday, Apple wasn't even allowing it in its store. So the advertisers and these other sources of revenue, that whole like Twitter 2.0, oh, what a visionary, that is poof, gone. All of that's gone. The third red flag is the regulators. And ding, 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 the regulators, when he kicked off the journalists on Friday, were even more alarmed, the EU especially. The EU has already told Musk that they are concerned about privacy and moderation, and that he was at risk not only for fines, but for being banned from the European Union. And don't forget, the US is only 25% of the traffic of Twitter. The FTC, we've also talked about that, about how the employees left right before the last quarter's sign-off were due for a consent agreement that predates Musk from 2011, where each quarter they are supposed to sign off at Twitter that they are in compliance on privacy. And those engineers, rather than sign off, resigned. We know that last week the FTC asked Musk, whether do you intend to comply with this consent decree? That also could shut this platform down. Okay, so where does this all leave us where we sit here today? I'm going to go back to one of our early charts. Remember this chart from one of the first Facebook Lives we did? This is pre-Musk. This company had 5.1 billion of revenue. It had a teeny tiny bit of debt. Teeny tiny, paid about 23 million of interest, as opposed to 1.2 billion with a B interest that he has to pay now. And still, before he bought it, this company lost in fiscal 2021, before Musk took over, lost 221 million. Where are we now? I suspect this revenue is down somewhere between 3 to 3.5 billion. We've got 1.2 billion of interest alone. This company is going to file for bankruptcy soon. Either that or be restructured. Now, going back to this debt, we know, we talked about last time, the banks are writing down their debt for year end. Banks have to mark to market. And when things are impaired, they have to take an accounting markdown for their positions. Bloomberg reported last week, and we covered this, that the banks that hold these top three tranches, which are considered the secured debt, which if you were like a secured company and you were like an airline, secured means something, because you have aircraft. Or if you were a paper mill or something with hard assets, that means something. This means just ahead of the 3 billion. But reportedly, the banks were going to mark down by 80, they were going to mark down their holdings to 80 cents on the dollar. That's like if you bought a home during the pandemic and you paid $100,000 in the heat of the market to leave a city and go live where you could work remote. Well, now your house isn't worth $100,000. Now it's worth $80,000. Well, if you're a bank and you made these loans, unlike you don't have to mark that down on your tax returns. The banks do have to mark that down. This unsecured loan, this last bit, the banks reportedly are marking down like something like 50 cents on the dollar. So what we had heard was the banks were offering to Musk, if you give us your Tesla stock as collateral, we'll refinance this at a lower interest rate. But it seems instead what Musk did is just sold off his Tesla stock, and he might be trying to pay off some of these banks, or he might just be using it for short-term liquidity needs. We don't know. This is, again, a private company. But what we do know is this company is bleeding cash, and the banks are going to be, he will be in default, covenant default of these loans and these bonds. He probably is already. And there's a cure period, and then there's a period after which he ends up being in default on these loans. And that time is coming. And so won't it be convenient for him when he steps down as CEO, puts some schlump in to replace him, and then files for bankruptcy? And then he can blame it on the schlump and not him. So again, nothing fundamentally has changed other than he is going to step away as the figurehead. The strategy remains that we do not provide content until this company is either bankrupt or restructured and ownership changes to somebody who will be responsible, who will put back content moderation, who will get back off these people that are so dangerous to us. James O'Keefe was allowed back on the platform. There's so much LGBTQ hate, especially towards transgender people, since Musk allowed. There's racism, anti-Semitism just running wild on the platform. Until they get that under control, until new responsible management comes back, stay the course. Let this go through its bankruptcy or restructuring process. Let new buyers come in. Let them learn from his mistakes. And by the way, you cannot operate in the EU unless he gets his act together. So whoever buys this next is going to have to do that. So with that, let me take some questions. Considering what happened to Saudi journalists, I'd be terrified. I don't think, listen, there is a Saudi prince that owns part of this. Here's my handy dandy chart. This is Twitter at closing. 13 billion of the bank debt we just talked about, then 33.5 billion of equity. Of that 33.5, Musk owns the vast majority, and another 7.1, this is what we know publicly, is owned by the Saudi prince, Larry Ellison, and some others. Nobody is stupid enough to put in more money at 44 billion valuation. This company is worth probably about 15 billion, if that. So there is some Saudi money in that. Janet Yellen had said that the Treasury Department was looking into the ownership of Musk Twitter, but nobody that he was in that box with today is stupid enough to put in more money. With new leadership, do you think the former employees would return? Possibly, depends who the leader is and whether they're willing to hire them back. You need to pay employees when they come back. So we don't know what is going to come next, but we do know that until Musk is out of the equation, we should not be going back because he's an authoritarian. He's going to want whoever this flunky is that's taking control is still going to answer to him. Before he took over, there was a board of directors that Twitter answered to. There were councils, there were employees that did moderation, whole staffs. There is none of that. This place is gutted. He's selling the sink. What is the possibility he will get tired of the game and sell Twitter? I think he's already tired of the game. He's just lost. He has a huge amount of egg on his face. That could happen. I think this is the first step, which is for him to step down as CEO. And the second step is that he will lose control of the ownership. Either he'll sell it, and when he sells it, he's going to take, again, a huge loss. He's going to sell it for about, I would say, 15 billion, which means the first 13 of the 15 goes to pay off the banks, and then the other 2 billion would be split between these people. Yeah, there's no way that the Saudis are so stupid to put in more money. So I guess, it's just a long way of saying that this company's either he's going to sell it and have to write down all that loss, which at this point he's just throwing more money, good money after bad money, when he sells Tesla shares and plows it into Twitter. I suspect that the Tesla shareholders are asking the board to prevent him from doing this. He has said twice this year that he was done selling Tesla blocks and then proceeded twice more to sell Tesla shares. So he's lost credibility with his own shareholders there. And I suspect there's something that will be put in place. I hear superhero and FT. Okay. Will the banks make him sell? The banks will end up owning this company if it defaults, basically. If it defaults, the equity becomes worthless, and the banks, if this company is worth 13 billion or less, which is probably not far away, will end up owning the company, and they'll sell it to pay themselves back. Can you go into a little more interest about the short interest? Yeah, so interest is... I never know how detailed to get with you all, but Basically, the interest that he pays is 1.2 billion a year. So roughly 100 million each month. But the things that change that, remember the bottom tranche is 11.75 coupon, so that's not going to change. But the thing that will change that are the top top two tranches are floating rate. So just like your home, if you have a floating rate mortgage on your home and interest rates go up, your payment goes up. Same thing for Elon. Bank loans are floating rate. Here it is again. So right now it's 1.2 billion. If interest rates go up or down, the interest payment will go up or down from $1.2 billion a year. But still, again, that's 100 million a month. And this company is losing 4 million a day reportedly. So much media attention. Musk was not born in the USA. Otherwise, yes, I suspect he would run for president. All these like megalomaniacs that were born billionaires and have these authoritarian traits. His follow-up tweet alludes to someone worse. I think it's sort of irrelevant. Whoever comes in next is going to be a placeholder. Like I said, no one with any credibility in their career is going to want to take this role because there's no board that they report to. They report to one person. So I can't see anyone good coming in. Is the Tesla brand permanently damaged? I think so. I think they just want him to get the shovel out of his hand and stop burying this company. There's a lot of analysts that already were, negative on this company and say it's just another car company. But the message was people were losing faith in him. The emperor has no clothes. I think whatever happens with Twitter next, this man, the mystique around him being this super genius that was going to come in and reinvent Twitter, he has to give that up now. He has failed. And I'm not an expert on Tesla, and again, I suspect the stocks, once he steps down from Twitter, it is going to see a huge short covering and a huge rebound tomorrow. But there are people that will not buy Teslas because of what's occurred. Have you heard any public rumblings from the Tesla board pressuring him to resign? The only thing I've read, and I don't know, again, I haven't followed Tesla all that closely, but his brother is a board member and it's other cronies. This is very similar to Facebook, where Mark Zuckerberg has stuck all his cronies on the Facebook board. So I have heard that it's very hard for activist investors to make change. However, I would be shocked. We'll hear someone from the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or CNBC, someone's going to get reporting, or Reuters, about what went down that caused this. Believe me, he would not be doing this on his own. He's got a ton of egg on his face, and he's just like the emperor has no clothes. He's failed here. So we don't know exactly what went on behind the scenes, but there's never a good secret on Wall Street. We will find out, other than this third biggest shareholder, who else did what with the board, whether they threatened to sell their blocks or what was happening behind the scenes. Let's see. Is he still making the 100 million interest payments that he doesn't? So that's a good question. Now, if he hasn't, we know he hasn't been paying anyone else. I hadn't thought about that. He's not paying his rent. He's not paying vendors. He's not paying severance. If he's not paying the banks, then he is in default, and they have 30 days, if that, and then they will be curing that by putting this company into bankruptcy and taking control of it. So you can't screw with the banks in the same way. They will have them on a very short leash. San Francisco, on the other hand, if you read the New York Times business section today, huge glut of office space, so they're probably not so quick to kick him out since the occupancy rate is so low. Will he still impact content on Twitter? Absolutely. I mean, again, it's sort of like, installing a figurehead. It's sort of like Jared Kushner going out to the Middle East on Trump's behalf to conduct foreign policy. Whoever this flunky is that comes in, Musk is not going to give up control. They report to him. He owns this company. And that's why either he's going to get someone who's who's better, but then they're going to have to say, you are totally hands off, or he's going to get some placeholder. I think he's going to have a hard time getting anyone at all decent. Let's see if I'll take one more question. Sorry about Arlene. We'll take one more question and then we'll call it a night. Okay, so I'm just going to finish off by ending where we started, which is, first of all, keep up the great work. We are doing what we needed to do. He is failing. And if we just wait, we're sort of at the 20-yard line now, waiting to score. Just stay the course. Do not provide content. There will be a time in the not too distant future when this company changes hands, hopefully to someone more responsible, and then we will all have the opportunity to go back if we so desire. Okay, everyone, I'll answer if you're listening to this later. If you want to leave questions as comments, I will go back and answer those as well. Have a good night.